Hello, everyone. My name's Donnie, and I'm with Creative Hands United. I want to thank you for tuning into our YouTube channel today. And I'm going to be interviewing a fantastic professor that works here at Moravian College, Dr. Laurie Kahn. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Kahn works in the education department here, and so she gets to work with all kinds of creative students and see all kinds of creative ideas that are on campus. So I would just like to welcome you, and I would also like to thank you for joining us today, Dr. Kahn.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you. So we're gonna hop right into the interview. So my first question is going to be, how long have you been here at Moravian, and what has been your main impression of the creativity of the students?
Absolutely, great question. So I'm really new here. I started just in August of 2017, so it's been just a couple of months here. But so far, I came from a large state university out on the West Coast, and so far my impression of the students has just, the students, meeting them when I was looking at the different places that I wanted to settle down and join the department. The students was what really attracted me here, because I think students choose Moravian for specific reasons. I think there's a really strong feeling of community and opportunity here at Moravian. And so far, I have not been disappointed at all. I have found that students are, really care about whatever their work is, whatever they're diving into, whether, it's civic engagement, working with students, or, like any sort of creative pursuit. And I think the opportunities allow students to be able to really dive into things in a unique and creative way. So
Yes, that's been my impression. I'm a sophomore here at Moravian, and I've gotten to work with a lot of students as well, and seeing their creativity is just something that's blown me away from being at this school.
Yeah, and I think it's very unique, absolutely, to the Moravian community. And there's so much also like diversity on campus, and I think that's something that the campus is continuing to really try to support.
That's an important aspect of this college too, and it allows us to show different point of views and perspectives, and there's a lot of different forms of art and music that are brought to this college by that diversity, and that's something that's really just amazing about this school.
Exactly, right? That people have different perspectives and different beliefs and different things that are like important to them, and being able to share it in such like a supportive community can really showcase that kind of like creativity. So absolutely.
I'm glad to hear such a great point of view on the creativity of the students.
Yeah, no sweat.
So how did you find your field of study, and what made you interested in studying in pursuing education as your profession?
Great question. So actually, when I was an undergrad at a similar small liberal arts college in Connecticut, I actually was a sociology undergraduate major at first, and I loved just basically like hearing stories and seeing like patterns of issues of equity and social inequity and justice and like systemic sort of power structures. And I was like fascinated because growing up, I grew up in the city of Chicago, and there were certain things that I saw, but being able to study things in a little bit more of like a scholarly academic way, but at the same time still doing like my research as an undergrad was like really like on the ground, working with individuals and doing like oral histories with people and their experiences. I noticed so much of like what I was interested in is like stories of youth and youth movements, and people who are working with children and young adults to bring out their voices and to amplify their experiences. And so that was something that really started me on my route to teaching. And then I ended up actually adding, we didn't have like a teaching degree, like I know you're getting certification. We had an education studies program where we looked at it more from like a social perspective. And so I ended up double majoring in ed studies and sociology. And then after I graduated, I thought I wanted to go into social work. I love the idea of like the helping professions, but I realized, sometimes you make a mistake in your career trajectory and you learn from that. And I learned that I liked like a classroom setting much more than like that sort of one-to-one. So I ended up doing a teaching degree and getting my master's in education. But yet there were so many sort of things that I saw. I was in the classroom, so I started teaching in a school specifically for students with disabilities. My master's was in special education because I'm really interested, like I was, like very well, in
Yes.
issues of
Yes.
like inequity and justice in education, and I found issues of special education to be like fraught with issues of like racial discrimination and gender bias and ableism and socioeconomic bias and things like that. Seeing certain students getting like all the goodies and other students getting none of the goodies, and so I realized like I wanted to kind of explore that a little deeper, and also I wanted to sort of work. I wanted to work with pre-service teachers. That was my favorite thing about like when I was in the classroom when I was teaching was like I loved my students with all my heart, but I also really found the most like professional gratification from like supporting my peers and my other teachers and engaging them. And so that's sort of what led me to do what I did, and going to get a PhD, and then looking for a program. I wanted to do teacher education, and my favorite thing is to engage pre-service teachers in ways that like spark their own sort of sociological imagination that allow them to really see larger social problems and how they're replicated in their classrooms and what they can do, and use their creativity and use their passion to not just teach like math, science, history, English, but to really like engage a future generation of activists and politicians and learners and scholars, and so that was something that just has always really.
That's really interesting to hear, and I'm fortunate to be pursuing an education major and have you as a professor. And the course I currently have you as a professor for is called Including Students with Disability, and it's been a really interesting course so far, just to hear about different ways to make classes truly integrated and inclusive for everyone.
Yeah.
And one thing this leads me to my next question is like, what is one thing you really wish about more teachers or just people in general would know about the creativity of these students that we're talking about in this course?
Like the K-12 students?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that we talk about regularly, is especially with disability, we always talk about it from like a deficit perspective, like what's wrong with someone, what can't somebody do? But like one of the things that we talk about so much is how to really take like a strength-based approach and understand like what amazing stories students have to bring into class, what gifts they have, and really incorporating that. And I think that so much, like especially the title of the class is inclusion, and this is true for all different students, regardless of ability label, race label, gender label, is that we have these assumptions about what that means in the classroom. And one of the things I just wish that every student that we have this conversation is, blowing that all up and really seeing students as individuals who have an intersection of like multiple dimensions of their identity, and they have like such joys to bring into class. And that inclusion isn't about like just dropping someone randomly in, but it's about that creative, reflective process where you think about your own practice and what you might be doing to support a student, but at the same time, even with the best intention, what you might be doing maybe that harms a student, and what you can do to be a better practitioner, a more creative and caring teacher. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Because here at Moravian, we go into the field early, and they send you out as for education majors. You get firsthand experience right away, and I've been fortunate enough to work with. I was in an IEP course. For those who don't know what that is, that's an individualized education plan. And it's all sorts of all different kinds of students, and just to see the creativity of these students and the way they work has just been so amazing. And it's like it's just like working with every other student, and
Right.
it's just an incredible feeling to see
Yeah, and the
these
fact that
students work.
everyone has a story to tell, and they might tell it in a different way, but that doesn't like diminish the value of that
Exactly,
story.
exactly.
Hmm.
So how important do you believe the characteristic of creativity is for a prospective teacher,
Oh,
or
yeah.
how important would you say it is in special education?
So, I mean, I would say it's incredibly important, but at the same time, if like you don't consider yourself a creative person, I wouldn't say don't go into the career or don't work with children, but because it is a skill that you develop, right?
Yeah,
Like when you first come into a classroom, let's say your first year as like a student teacher, you might be almost like just terrified. So you might not have like that ability to be as creative as you'd like, but later on as you get more comfortable with it, you
yeah,
develop those skills, it becomes a little bit easier. But it's crucial to the field of teaching because you're constantly like assessing and reassessing and doing work and saying like, okay, what didn't work this time, why didn't it work, what other ways can I like approach this conversation or this lesson, or you're constantly thinking of new ways to engage the kiddos in your classroom in ways that are meaningful and powerful to them. So creativity is, it's at the forefront of what we do. I would say creativity, a dedication, and an ability to like be reflexive in your own practice.
yeah. One thing I've noticed going since I'm only a sophomore, I've been able to see a lot of the practices recently in education through my high school and middle school, and it's really focused on standardized tests and assessment. And I've seen
Yeah.
how in some of my classes how it's just the lack of creativity or the lack of interactiveness between the teacher and the student is something like now we're talking about in some of my other courses about how being making like these fun activities, bringing those into the classroom and being creative that way
Yeah.
is vital for the way students learn now.
Absolutely, Donnie. I mean, so also when we think about this era that we're in, this high stakes testing, it's only really recently. I mean, we've had this type of testing and testing and testing basically since like the Reagan era, since like the 1980s,
Yeah,
after A Nation at Risk, and that came out. And then with No Child Left Behind in 2004 was when we upped the ante and made these like high stakes, right, standardized testing. So especially for students at Moravian who are traditional like age range, that is the experience that you've had in schools because that started in 2004, but that's not the way it's always been. So it's not to say that it's going to be like that forever. Things could change. We could have another policy that changes and takes that away. It could get better. It could get worse. We have no idea at this point. Hopefully it gets better. But at the same time, because this is the era we're in, it's even more crucial. Like you said, it's so vital for teachers to, have that creativity and that love for engagement and thinking of like new ways to activate student motivation, because sitting there like memorizing facts and filling in bubbles isn't going to motivate students to learn. I have this quilt behind me, and I don't know, this you can't see this, but that some of my students in a class of this school I was at before made, and there's this great square on the quilt that one of my
I
students
see
made.
that. Yes.
And there's like a box, and it's like in half, and it says which bubble, what is it? What bubbles should our kids be asked to fill in? And the first one is like the standardized testing bubbles, and then it's juxtaposed with an image of like a thought bubble over a student's head. And it's this idea that like as teachers, like we have to have our students participate in these examinations, but what we really want is for them to be creative, critical thinkers who can
Yes.
solve real world problems.
Yeah. And that I completely agree with that. I feel that the education system right now needs to be reworked a bit so we can truly bring out that creativity and
Yeah.
critical thinking of the students.
Yeah. And what happens is that the most like resourced school districts and the ones that are, the most well off end up, the standardized testing and the high stakes doesn't affect them as much. And so they still have, like the arts and extra curricular activities, and they still have different like that are outside of that like standards-based assessment, constant testing and just math and English. But then it's the schools that are the most under-resourced, that in like the neighborhoods that need it the most, where things like art programs and drama programs get cut, and they teach to the test, and they have like curriculum things, and so it ends up affecting the most vulnerable communities the most, when they're the ones also who have like the strongest, like some of the strongest stories to tell, and engagement, and they're sort of like the most disempowered by the system that's kind of designed for them to not compete and not succeed.
Yeah, and those are all extremely important points, and really what we need to be thinking of going forward in education.
Yeah, right. That creativity shouldn't just be like reserved for the privileged.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so going to the final question, how would you rate like the programs that we have on campus, such as clubs, athletics, and that truly bring out the creativity of our students here on campus?
Great question. So, I mean, I just love it because I've not yet met a single student who doesn't do like 10 other things. Like, I feel like at Moravian, students are so connected with things that are going. I love here. I even just found out that you were part of this club just a little bit ago. And it's just really incredible how many different opportunities there are, and that it's an important part of life, of student life here on campus. And so, I mean, like I said, I've only been here since August, but so far I've been able to participate in activities like this, like we're doing right now, and or like I've gone to a couple like games where some of my students have been playing, so I could kind of see them in action, and it's been fun to like cheer on my students at like their soccer games, or that's been a lot of fun. But I'm just always really impressed with the variety of different sort of ways that students can get engaged, whether it was like the first couple months they had Heritage Day, and I was blown away by that work. And
I remember visiting Moravian on Accepted Students Day and seeing all the clubs laid out, and I was blown away by how many options there were.
For such a small campus.
Exactly. It's not a very large school. It's some of the high schools in the area are bigger than our campus, but it's amazing to see how close everybody is, and that's one of the reasons I decided personally. I always thought I was going to be going to a larger school like University of Buffalo or Washington State. I always thought like a much larger school I might wind up at, but just to see like how close everybody is, and through the clubs and creativities, that's one of our goals as our club, Creative Hands United, is to showcase all the creativities and talents of our students on campus, and hopefully we can continue to do so through our web show and through our YouTube channel and Instagram and social media in general.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I also love your sort of comprehensive definition of creativity, right? Creativity could be like joining a sports team. It could be like being a part of like the Black Student Union, and like political activity. There's so many different ways that you can really.
It's not just limited down to one. You can be creative. You could be creative through what you think what you might think is just something you do daily. Could be creative to another group of people. So it's really awesome to see such enthusiasm to share that with everyone here at Moravian.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm glad I could be a part of this, even
and
just for a little bit.
And thank you for joining us. So that's going to wrap up our interview. I once again would love to thank you for joining us, Dr. Kahn, and taking time out of your very busy schedule to be a part of this. And I would also like to thank you guys, the viewers, for coming to our YouTube channel and supporting our club and Creative Hands United. It really means a lot to everybody in the club, and all the work that goes in just goes to show that it's not in vain. And I would really like, from the bottom of my heart, love to thank you guys for tuning in. And I would like to invite you to subscribe if you like what you see, and please look us up on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Creative Hands United. And I would like to say have a wonderful day. Dr. Kahn, have a fantastic week and weekend. And thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.